On a quiet winter morning, February 26, 2019, a man named Lei Hee-jin stepped into the Dong'an police station in Onyang City. His voice was low, his concern clear. He hadn't heard from his parents in days. His father, 62, and mother, 58, had vanished without a word. He asked the police for help, hoping for urgency, praying for answers. But if you've followed stories from South Korea before, you might know the rhythm of these cases, especially with the elderly. There's a kind of slow reluctance in the air, a quiet disbelief that something could be truly wrong. That day was no different. The police listened, but not closely. They dismissed Lee Hee's concern with a calm shrug. Two older people disappearing together. Rare, yes. But to them, it felt like nothing more than a misunderstanding. A couple off on a trip, perhaps. Or maybe one had fallen ill, and the other followed, as caretakers do. Lei Hee shook his head. They're healthy, he told them. Both of them. No illnesses. No signs. It didn't make sense. How could they vanish, together, so suddenly? Still, the officers urged patience. Go home, they said. They'll return. Maybe they simply forgot to tell you. That waiting turned into days, then weeks. The silence stretched and twisted around Lei Hee like cold mist. On March 16th, with no word, he went back this time, more desperate than before, and something shifted. Within 48 hours, on March 18th, the search took a dark and quiet turn. At the Hyundai apartment complex in Gwangyang, tucked deep inside the Dong'an district, officers opened a hidden cabinet in the wall. What they found stopped everything. The heavily decomposed body of Soo-ja, Lee Hee's mother. But the day had more shadows in store. That same afternoon, from a rural part of Pangti, another call came through. A warehouse manager, bothered by a strange smell that had clung to the air for days, had finally investigated. Inside a refrigerator, tucked away in quiet horror, was the body of an elderly man. DNA later confirmed what Lei Hee already feared. It was his father, Lee Dae-koo. 2 losses in one day, 2 scenes too painful to absorb. Lee Hee's world collapsed. But what broke him further, what kept him awake, was the quiet cruelty revealed in the forensic reports. Both his parents had been murdered. Not quickly, not quietly. Their bodies bore so many wounds that even experts couldn't find a clear cause of death. It was as though the pain itself had taken their lives, slow, deliberate, and without mercy. The report dated their deaths to February 25th, just one day before. Lei Hee first walked into the police station. A bitter whisper settled over the truth. Had his words been heard the first time, the evidence might have spoken louder. No one could have saved them, but maybe their story would have been clearer. Yet the investigators remained curiously unmoved. In their eyes, this looked like revenge. The signs were there, they said. They would begin by tracing the couple's relationships. Surely, someone close knew the truth. The investigation split into 2 paths, one team searching the crime scenes for witnesses, the other examining the web of people who'd known the victims. Soon, near the warehouse where Dae-koo's body had been hidden, several villagers offered a memory small, but strange. On the night of February 25th, a strange smell had drifted near the warehouse. Curious, a few locals followed the scent, found a man behind the building, burning a bag. Not a crime in itself, but the stranger's reaction was jarring. At the sound of voices, he fled, quick, nervous, and disappearing into the night. They remembered him now short, a little heavy, and not very fast. Not a local farmer. Not someone they recognized. The lead was passed on to the second team. But when they asked around neighbors, friends, relatives, no one knew a man like that. The Lee couple had lived quietly, respectfully. There had never been any tension, no drama, no enemies. But Leahy saw it differently. When he heard about the bag being burned, he didn't hesitate. This wasn't revenge, he said. This was a robbery. What made him so sure? It all returned to that very morning, February 25th. Hours before the murders, Leahy had sold his Bugatti Veyron. From that sale, he had given his parents 500 million won, nearly $400,000 in cash, tucked carefully into a bag for safekeeping. And now, that money was gone, and a man had been seen burning a bag behind the warehouse. The police began to listen. They searched the apartment again. There was no trace of the cash. The accounts were clean, no recent transactions, no sign of movement. The evidence supported Leahy's claim. This hadn't been random. Someone had known, someone close. Only a handful of people knew about the car sale, which meant the suspect had to be familiar, someone who understood the family's habits, someone they might have trusted. But then, something strange surfaced. Why had the killer preserved Mr. Lee's body in a refrigerator in Pankti, while leaving Mrs. Lee's body to decay in the cabinet at home? Was it practical, a matter of time, transport, or panic? Or was it intentional? Some believed the decomposition had meaning, that perhaps the killer had felt more hatred for Sunja, that her suffering was meant to be remembered, to be witnessed, a message carved in silence and decayed. To the investigators, this hinted at something darker, personal vendetta. But just then, one officer raised a quiet question. Something didn't fit. If Leahy is wealthy enough to own a Bugatti, he asked, why were his parents living in such an ordinary home? When asked, Leahy's response was simple. I have many cars. Selling that one meant nothing. And maybe that was the issue. When people with immense wealth choose quiet, modest lives, it's often not without reason. And so the question whispered in the room, slow and low, was this family hiding something that no one was meant to see? With a quiet sense of unease settling in, the investigators turned their attention toward the Lee family's background. What they uncovered left them stunned. Contrary to what they had first believed, Leahy Jean wasn't the couple's only child. There was an older brother, a name that hadn't been spoken until now. His name was Hehan, and once it was mentioned, a strange clarity rippled through the case. To the detectives, the violence suddenly felt less like a mystery and more like an echo, something inevitable. But why? To understand that, you need to know who Hyun really was. Back in October of 2008, South Korea found itself pulled into an economic storm. The crisis was sharp, and families across the country began grasping for stability. Many turned to the stock market, looking not for wealth, but for survival. Amid this uncertainty, a new figure emerged, a young man whose voice echoed through financial circles like a rising bell. That man was Hee-hon. He quickly earned grand, almost mythical titles: the Warren Buffett of Korea, the top trader of Suongdam, the master of investment in Seoul's bustling financial districts. His name became currency. By 2014, he wasn't just known among traders, he was everywhere. On television screens, on economic broadcasts, his face, sharp and confident, was framed as the portrait of success. Hehan said he had studied English literature at an elite private university in Seoul. During college, he claimed he had earned nearly 5 million won, roughly $4,000 each month, through private tutoring. But after graduating, his sharp financial instincts pulled him away from books and into markets, and there he soared. In less than a decade, he had transformed his life. He purchased a sprawling mansion in Seoul's glamorous Gangnam district, paying in full. His garage sparkled with luxury, a Bugatti, a Lamborghini, a Bentley, and a Rolls. But it wasn't the wealth that mesmerized people, it was his generosity. Heehan appeared to want to help. He gave interviews, offered guidance, and shared what he called his secrets freely. He even helped some followers manage their finances. Too many. It felt like a gift, like a rare chance to rise alongside him. As demand surged, he opened an investment consulting company, and for those who preferred to manage their own money, he graciously offered stock recommendations, his sure bets. Even Leahy, his younger brother, entered the world of finance, launching a peer-to-peer lending firm to assist those who lacked the capital to invest on their own. In what felt like the blink of an eye, the Lee brothers were said to be worth over 20 billion, won around $16 million US. But behind the shimmer lay silence, and behind the silence, shadows. Bit by bit, the mask began to crack. Investors who had once praised Heehan began to suffer losses. One by one, they slipped into financial ruin. Curious, some began to investigate. What they found unraveled everything. Heehan's entire story had been carefully invented. He had never attended the university he claimed. His wealth, his lifestyle, had been a carefully constructed illusion. His social media posts flaunted fake achievements. At one point, he claimed he was becoming the exclusive distributor of Lamborghini and Bugatti in South Korea. But records showed that due to the country's market size, such partnerships were never even considered. One summer evening in 2016, he posted a photo on Facebook. He claimed to have just landed in China and was preparing for dinner with a high-ranking official from Gangsu province. At the time, few questioned him. The post seemed harmless, prestigious, even. But when his empire collapsed and authorities investigated, the truth emerged. The airport photo had been stolen from the internet. The Chinese government publicly denied that any such official existed. And just like that, the myth vanished. His financial kingdom crumbled. Thousands of hopeful investors were left penniless. Some, crushed by debt and despair, tragically took their own lives. One could imagine, had Heehan not been imprisoned, someone might have tried to take justice into their own hands, which brought investigators back to the murders. If someone couldn't reach Heehan, would they have gone after his parents instead? It was a difficult theory to investigate. Heehan had deceived so many. Anyone could have held a grudge. Just as detectives felt the weight of this wall, the same investigator who once noticed a contradiction in Lee's story spoke up again. He suggested something quiet but powerful. Perhaps Lee had been hiding his brother's identity to keep the family's past in the shadows. But now, with the veil lifted, maybe he would finally tell the full truth. And he did. When confronted gently, Lee opened up. It came in a quiet flood, like a dam finally giving way. After Heehan went to prison, the family had returned some illegal funds, but much had been kept. This was why they lived modestly, hiding in plain sight, avoiding questions. Leahy admitted that, at first, he didn't connect the murders to Heehan's past. He was simply trying to protect what remained of their name. Then, he said something that left the room still. On the night of February 25th, just hours before the murders, he had received a message from his mother. It came through a messaging app. She told him she had just met a successful businessman, a Harvard graduate named Kim Young-ho, and that she hoped Leahy could meet him for a possible business partnership. Intrigued, Leahy added the man and began chatting with him online. During their conversation, he accidentally tapped the video call button. To his surprise, Young Ho answered. For just a moment, Leahy saw the man's face round and full. At first, it seemed insignificant, but then came the question: if both victims were killed on the evening of February 25th, how had Sunja sent that message? There were only two possibilities. Either the forensic team had misjudged the time of death, or the person messaging Leahy wasn't Sunja at all. If it was the latter, this so-called Kim Young-ho could very well be the killer. Maybe he had tried to lure Leahy too. The police acted quickly. Based on Leahy's description, they created a sketch of Young-ho. When they showed it to the villagers who had seen the mysterious man near the warehouse, heads slowly began to nod. The resemblance was undeniable, and with that sketch in hand, the search turned visual. Officers scoured surveillance footage near the scenes. Soon enough, a figure appeared on screen, and the story in shadows began to take form. As investigators sifted through the details, a subtle thread began to emerge, one that suggested the suspect had not acted alone. Surveillance and witness accounts hinted at the presence of 3 other individuals, but the footage was blurred, the faces obscured, and only one man could be clearly identified. That man was Kim Doon. He was the same individual who had impersonated Kim Young-ho to contact the victim's family through the messaging app, and yet, when officers brought him in, they weren't met with the resistance they had braced for. Doon didn't deny a thing. Quietly, almost with a strange relief, he confessed. But what he shared wasn't a simple admission of guilt. It was a confession layered in pain, betrayal, and something darker, just as detectives had suspected. Doon wasn't some random criminal. He had been one of Haeon's many victims, but unlike others, he wasn't a typical casualty. Da-un came from privilege. He had studied abroad in the United States, earning both bachelor's and master's degrees. For years, he ran a successful yacht rental business and lived comfortably. But in August of 2017, life unraveled. His company collapsed. His marriage fell apart. And with no clear path forward, he returned home to South Korea, hoping to rebuild with the savings he had left. That's when he met Haeon. Still reeling from loss, Doon was eager for partnership, for hope, and Haeon, charming, successful, influential, seemed like a godsend. Desperate to impress him, Doon not only invested, but even gave Haeon his father 20 million won, roughly $16, as a gesture of goodwill. But just like that, everything vanished. Doon was scammed out of the last of his fortune, and when he realized Haeon was already in prison, beyond reach, his rage twisted. With no way to confront the man who'd destroyed his life, he turned his gaze toward Haeon's family. But Doon, weakened and unhealthy, knew he couldn't do it alone. He claimed he hired 3 young Korean Chinese men online to assist him. According to his story, they carried out the killings while he planned and cleaned up after the crime. Afterward, the 3 allegedly fled to China's Jilin province. While that prevented immediate arrests, it didn't shift Doon's role in the police's eyes. He was, without question, the mind behind it all. The next step seemed obvious: trial. But then, the story slipped beyond the courtroom. When media outlets began reporting the case in full, something unexpected happened. The South Korean public didn't react with outrage. They responded with sympathy for the killer. Calls flooded in, not for harsher punishment, but for leniency. To some, it made no sense. However wronged June may have been, the victims were elderly, innocent, weren't they? But the truth was murkier than anyone had imagined, because the Lee family's crimes hadn't ended with Hehan. His parents, once seen as quiet, tragic figures, had been deeply involved in the fraud, particularly his mother, Sunja. She had appeared on her son's subscription-based investment channel, presenting herself as a sweet, wise mother. She helped promote Hehan's false stock tips, luring unsuspecting investors. She added credibility, comfort, trust, and when the empire crumbled, she was tried and convicted, though she received only a suspended sentence and a small fine. But what disturbed many wasn't just her role in the SCAM, it was her attitude afterward. Faced with public anger, she didn't express remorse. Instead, she proudly stated, "No one in South Korea studies stocks as seriously as our son," as if his conviction were a mistake, not justice. Now the public's sympathy for Doon made more sense. The victims, it seemed, had played a part in their own fate. Just when it felt as though the case had reached its resolution, a new layer unraveled. From across the sea in China, the 3 young men Doon had claimed were accomplices posted shocking statements. Their voices, quiet until now, came forward with a different version. They weren't murderers, they had been tricked. They said they had responded to a job listing online. Doon had posted an ad seeking security guards, promising easy work and good pay. Intrigued, they applied. Once hired, they were flown to South Korea, but the job was nothing like what had been promised. Upon arrival, Doon asked them to help move to large objects he revealed to be bodies. When they realized what he was asking, they panicked. All 3 fled immediately, flying back to China. According to them, they had no part in the killings. They were just laborers, caught in a nightmare. At first, Korean police were skeptical, but they launched a full investigation and asked for China's cooperation. And the evidence slowly backed the young men's claims. None had received payment. In fact, one of them had to borrow money from friends around 200,000 won to afford the return ticket. That didn't match Doin's story at all. So, if he had lied about their role, what else had he fabricated? Bit by bit, the tale began to crumble. The revenge narrative was false. The crime hadn't been an emotional outburst. It had been planned. For over a year, Doon had been posing as a private investigator. He approached other victims of Haeon's fraud, those who had once shown up at the Lee household demanding restitution. Quietly, he gathered names, tracked routines, and learned the family's habits. He installed wiretaps in the Lee's car. He watched them dot, and on the morning of the murders, Doon had one detail already in his sights. That was the day Leahy had given his parents 500 million won in cash, proceeds from selling his luxury car. But something didn't add up. The car, his Bugatti Veyron, had sold for 1.5 billion won. Leahy had kept 1 billion won for himself. His parents knew, and if they knew, so did Doon through the listening devices. The original motive, it seemed, had nothing to do with revenge. It was greed. Even after the killings, Doon had attempted to meet Leahy, likely to steal the remaining money. Meanwhile, he had been contacting a broker, preparing for a quiet escape to the Philippines. When police finally saw the full picture, it became clear Doon had acted alone. His true motive was robbery. The Suan Supreme Court charged Kim Doon with murder, robbery, corpse disposal, and illegal trespassing. In his first trial, he was sentenced to life in prison. Though he appealed, the Supreme Court upheld the sentence in 2021. But the story didn't end there. He had convicted of fraud had by then completed his prison sentence. One would expect that time behind bars, coupled with the brutal loss of his parents, might change him, but it didn't. He resurfaced quietly. This time, he turned to cryptocurrency. Using Bitcoin, he launched a new scam, and once again, he was arrested. In September 2023, he was briefly jailed, then released on bail, and perhaps the most painful part of this entire story, after everything, after the destruction, the deaths, the deception, he showed no remorse. He used the money that remained to marry a pop idol, start a family, and return to a life of luxury. This case, as tragic as it is, offers more than just a haunting story. It is a mirror held up to greed, to the pursuit of wealth without conscience. Some deceive without shame, others kill without mercy, but both leave behind scars that ripple through families, communities, and a quiet, grieving world. As the years rolled on, a quiet stillness settled over Zhao Dafu's life. Though he never gave up entirely, deep down, he began to accept what his heart had resisted for so long, that he might never see his wife or children again. In his family's genealogy book, he made 2 simple, sorrowful notes. For his eldest son, Yong, 1994, taken by mother, disappeared. For his younger son, Yongquan, 1994, taken by mother, disappeared. Then, one morning, nearly 2 decades later, the silence broke. 18 years after the day everything changed, Dafu received a phone call that made his hands tremble. It was the local police, and their message was short, but staggering. They believed they had found his eldest son. On September 8, 2012, while Dafu was working as a laborer in Guangdong province, his phone rang again and again. Relatives, friends, everyone was trying to reach him. And once the message sank in Dafu, a man known for saving every penny did something he hadn't done in years. He bought a plane ticket and returned home. At the Yingtown police station in Qizhou County, Dafu met a young man. As soon as he saw him, something stirred inside him. The resemblance was striking. His face echoed Dafu's own, while the chin looked exactly like his missing wife, Shua Chin. And soon, DNA tests confirmed what the heart already knew. This young man's Wang was, indeed, Yong, Dafu's long-lost son. But there were still so many questions. Yong had vanished when he was only 7. He remembered very little of his childhood. How had he survived? Where had he been for 18 long years? And perhaps most hauntingly, what had happened to his mother and younger brother? Slowly, softly, the memories came. That afternoon in 1994, Yong and his little brother had followed their mother to the market in Yingtown. At one point, a man standing inside a roadside shop waved toward their mother. She followed him inside, while the boys waited outside, sitting on a bench, playing quietly. Then music started blaring from inside the shop, loud, jarring. Curious and confused, the boys stepped inside. What Yong saw next never left him. A man held their mother down. Another approached with a syringe and injected something into her head. She struggled wildly, panicked, but the first man pulled out a knife and stabbed her in the back. Again and again after that, Yong's memories blurred. He and his brother were held in a dark, windowless basement beneath the shop. Yong once tried to escape with Yongquan, but they were caught. Eventually, they were put on a long train ride. He didn't know where they were going, only that it took hours, maybe days. They arrived in a rural area, Puxian City, province. Then, one day, a man took Yongquan away. Yong never saw his little brother again. Soon after, another man appeared. His name was Su Jinchi. He took Ying in and became his adoptive father. He gave him a new name, Suang. As Swang grew older, the questions deepened. He didn't look like Jinchi. He didn't feel like he belonged. He couldn't remember his real name, but he recalled flashes. His father wore a suit and rode a bicycle. His mother cooked over an open flame and worked in the fields. She raised pigs. Their life was poor, but filled with love. All he could remember of his name was a nickname, Young Dot, as he grew into adulthood. Swang never stopped hoping. He kept a diary, its most sacred page covered with old photographs, tracking his growth year after year. From 2000 to 2005, he preserved every portrait, clinging to a fragile hope that someone, someday, might recognize him. After middle school, Jinchi sent Swang to work at a gemstone workshop in Guangdong province. His monthly pay was only 300 yuan, about $45. It wasn't even enough for rent. He survived on noodles that cost 30 cents a day. He lived in suffering, longing for a past he could barely remember. Still, he didn't stop. He sketched childhood memories. He recalled glimpses of his mother's tragic final moments. His drawings weren't perfect, but they were vivid. Around 3 years later, Jinchi returned to his hometown in Fujian, while Swang remained behind in Guangdong working, saving, searching. He traveled secretly to Jiangsu, Hubei, and Hunan provinces. Desperate to recover any detail, he even covered the walls of his rented room with cityscapes, trying to jog his memory. During the 2012 Chinese New Year, everything shifted. He visited a friend in Longchang County, Sichuan province. While eating with the family, he tasted 2 dishes, Chinese sausage and watercress, and in an instant, the flavors unlocked something buried deep inside. These were the tastes of his childhood. That same week, he registered on the Baby Come Home website, a platform helping people find lost loved ones. But when he shared his story, it shocked the volunteers. It seemed too unbelievable. The online community questioned its truth. Still, Swang persisted. He used the name Xiao Yongyong, believing vaguely that his surname might be Xiao or Jiao. He couldn't remember his mother's name, but he drew the layout of his childhood village. He remembered dragon boat races during festivals, a bamboo grove, twin ponds, a stream beneath a small bridge where he and his brother had caught crabs. It wasn't much, but it was something. Volunteers searched records across Sichuan, but nearly 20 years had passed, and so much had changed. The world he remembered no longer looked the same. To help him recall more, they took him to Sichuan, visiting village after village. One name, G Street, stood out in his memory, and finally, near Dezhou City, they found a small town that seemed familiar. But when they asked around, no one remembered a mother and 2 sons disappearing in the 1990s. Still, they pressed on. They visited the village committee and the police station. No answers. After 7 days of walking, dusty roads and chasing fading memories, they returned empty-handed, heartbroken. Then, a call changed everything. A middle-aged woman in Qi County named Xiao Xing reached out to the volunteers. 18 years ago, her own son Wang Shonghad vanished after school. She had searched tirelessly ever since, and now she had seen an article about a young man named Suang. She thought just maybe it could be her son. But after speaking with volunteers, it became clear this wasn't her child. Instead, Swang might be the son of another Zhao family. From nearby Yongxing town. Excitement spread. The police confirmed it. In Zhenkou village, there lived a Zhao family who had reported 3 disappearances in the early 90s. On September 11, 2012, The village gathered at the entrance to welcome a boy they hadn't seen since he was 7. Firecrackers echoed down the road as villagers lined up to greet him. When Yong appeared with the volunteers, his eyes filled with tears. He had no words, but in his silence, everything was said. Dafu led him gently inside the family home. He sat him down and pulled out worn pictures of a simpler time, of his mother. His brother, Yong wept. But Dafu had been carrying a question for 18 years, one he had always feared asking, and finally, he asked, "Son, how did your mother leave that day?" Yong reached into his bag and pulled out the drawings. Then, he told his father everything. Dafu sat in silence. For several long seconds, he said nothing, and then he whispered, with quiet resolve, "I will find your mother and your brother. That is my only wish, now." That very afternoon, they went to the Kijong County Police Bureau and filed a report. Yong's memories were clear enough for the police to believe him, but to reopen a case from 18 years ago would take more evidence, details, testimony, and so the search began again. On September 13th, 2 officers accompanied Yong to Pushan, to a village called Heji. They questioned his adoptive father, Jinchi, about what had happened all those years ago. But Jinchi was cold. He claimed it had been over 20 years, and he didn't remember anything. Unwilling to give up, Yong asked other villagers, but they too avoided his questions. No one wanted to speak of the past. So the investigators turned to the local police station for help. With gentle pressure, they asked Jinchi again. This time, he broke. He said a man had approached him long ago, offering a child for adoption, for 5,800 yuan, about $850. He took the boy home, and with that, the buried truth began to rise to the surface. But even with a name, time doesn't always give back the answers it once took. The man who had connected Yong to his adoptive father Su Jinchi was now old. His memory had faded. He struggled to recall details. Still, police brought Jinchi to Gand village in B-town, hoping anything might trigger his memory. There, after walking past homes that had been rebuilt, fields that had changed, and roads that barely resembled the past, he finally paused. He pointed to a house. It was the home of Wang Zhen, though the building had been rebuilt into a multi-story structure. The upstairs loft, the one with a small temple shrine, remained eerily untouched, the same place where Yong had once been locked away. But when officers questioned Wang Zhen, he gave little away. He admitted that Su Jinchi had adopted a boy through him, but said nothing about how that boy came to be there. So the police shifted tactics. They turned their focus to Wang Zhen's circle, and soon they uncovered a new piece of the puzzle. Wang Zhen's wife, quiet, withdrawn, was also from Kijong County in Sichuan, and she too had been kidnapped as a child and brought to Gang. She told police that over 20 years ago, a man known as Pennai had taken her from her hometown. She remembered seeing other children brought to Wang's house as well. This small thread unraveled quickly. Pennai's real name was Zhong Gixian, a 58-year-old man from the same Xinyang town where Yong had been born. Records confirmed that Zhang had previously served 6 years in prison, convicted by the Kijong County People's Court for child abduction, and he hadn't acted alone. 2 others had been sentenced with him. One of them was Pu Jeon, the same man Dafu had always suspected. Investigators now believed that Zhong Pu and a 3rd accomplice had been responsible for the kidnapping of Yong and his younger brother all those years ago. They brought Wang Zhen in again for further questioning, and then swiftly arrested Zhong. They also located Pu Jan, now 51 years Old Pooh gave up his secrets quickly. He admitted to kidnapping the two brothers, but stopped short of revealing what had happened to their mother, Schwacken. Instead, he mentioned a third man, Liao Dinji. Police immediately launched a search, but Liao, sharp and alert even after all these years, had already fled. Pooh revealed they were blood brothers. Liao had been adopted into another family, but had always stayed close to Pooh. Investigators searched the homes of Pooh's relatives in nearby towns, and there they found Liao hiding. In the interrogation room, Liao sighed deeply, as if a weight had finally become too heavy to carry. He looked the officers in the eyes. "I want to confess everything," he said, "but I ask for the government's leniency." Then he told the whole story. He took them back to July of 1994. At the time, Liao had visited Pooh's home, hoping to borrow some money, but Pooh had other ideas. He brought up a plan they had discussed many times before: kidnapping. He said they could make thousands by selling children. At first, Liao hesitated, but poverty and Pooh's persuasion wore him down. Liao was assigned to scout for targets. He waited on the streets near Pooh's shop, looking for a vulnerable child. Days passed. No opportunities came, so Pooh made a darker suggestion. If children were with their parents, they would kill the adults first. And on July 12th, they saw Schwacken walking by Pooh's shop, holding the hands of her two little boys. Pooh stepped outside, smiling gently, and asked her to deliver a message to someone in Genko village. Trusting him, she followed him in. Meanwhile, Liao turned up the volume on a cassette player. Loud music filled the space, covering any sounds of struggle. The two boys grew curious. They wandered into the back room. There, they saw it all. Liao had pinned their mother down. She was fighting, screaming. Then Pooh pulled out a knife. The children watched as their mother was stabbed again and again. After her death, they were locked in the basement for a week. Then Pooh contacted a trafficker named Zhong. He arranged transport for the brothers first to Beijing, then to Puxian City, Fujian Province. Their mother never left. Pooh and Liao dismembered her body and buried her in a vegetable garden behind the shop. On February 28th, 2013, at 10 o'clock a.m., police brought Pooh back to that very garden. Crowds gathered. Neighbors held their breath. The confession had been made, but evidence still had to be found. At the garden's edge, behind the bicycle repair shop on Bow Street in Yongqing Town, excavation began. The technical team worked slowly, sifting through every handful of soil. Mixed among the dirt were bones, some from pigs, some from chickens. But then came something different. A charred fragment, part of a human skull, and not far from it ashes, melted plastic, a rope once used to tie limbs. Pooh confessed that in 2008 he had dug up 2 of the bags containing Schwacken's remains and burned them in the corner of the courtyard. But one bag, the third, remained buried. He couldn't remember exactly where, so the team made a decision. They would dig 3 feet deep across the entire garden. And near dusk, they found it. A black plastic bag. Inside, bones. When pieced together, they formed the lower half of a human body. DNA testing later confirmed the truth. The bones belonged to Zhao Schwacken. After 18 years, her son had finally brought justice to her name, but Yongquan, the younger brother, was still missing, so the investigation continued. This time, they followed the trafficker John. He led them to the family that had purchased Yongquin back then. But Yongquin's story had twisted and turned. Many times, he had been sold 3 times. First to a man named Safa, for 7,500 yuan, about $1,100. But when Safa realized the child kept crying and drawing attention, he sold him again, this time at a loss. A middleman named Chen then passed Yongquan along to a man with the surname Wu, and that was where the trail ended. The boy was renamed Wu Qinfa. When police reached the Wu household, they learned that Qinfa now lived in Beijing. After verifying his identity through photographs, they made contact. And on March 20th, 2013, the brothers were reunited. After 19 years apart, Yongyong and Yongquan stood side by side once again. The case was finally closed. For their father, Dafu, none of it felt real. Had Yongyong never found his way home, the truth might have stayed buried forever. On August 14th, 2014, the Dezhou City Intermediate People's Court issued its verdict. Pujian was sentenced to death for intentional homicide and child abduction. Liao Dingyi received life in prison. They were ordered to pay 8,897 yuan in compensation, about $7,500. Both men appealed. On April 20th, 2015, the Sichuan Provincial High People's Court rejected those appeals. The original sentences stood. On November 24th, 2014, trafficker Zheng Gixian was sentenced to 11 years and fined 10,000 yuan, about $1,500. His profits would be confiscated, and as for the family, they rebuilt. Yongyong returned to his gemstone workshop in Guangdong Dafu, now with a new wife, went back to his home in Zhongsu village. Together, they raised ducks and worked the land. Yongquan stayed in Beijing. Though they were reunited, life had scattered them once again, in a different corner of the country. The warm, quiet days from 18 years ago would never come back. But for the Zhao family, truth had finally found its way home. Almost at once, the silence broke as the workers dug carefully beneath the floor. They made a haunting discovery. Steel reinforcement bars had been deliberately sliced through, like someone had made room for secrets. 8 inches down, they found something small but chilling, a fabric glove, weathered and buried in dust. The air at the scene thickened. Tension hung like fog as they dug deeper down to nearly 2 feet. Another object emerged, tangled, thread-like hair, human hair. Then came the unmistakable scent. It moved through the basement like a whisper from the grave, the stifling odor of decay. Now there was no doubt. Something or someone had been buried here. From that moment on, every movement was slow, precise. Every layer of earth removed with reverence, as though the soil itself was holding onto something sacred. At 11 p.m., the first body surfaced. A woman. Her body showed no visible injuries. Her face, though pale with time, still bore the outline of who she once was. Half an hour later, the second body was found. A man. His body told a different story. Swollen, bruised, his neck carried the harsh imprint of a life taken by force. They had been buried, one atop the other, the woman placed gently above the man, as if someone had still cared enough to give her a softer place to rest. Facial features remained intact, enough to confirm what had once only been a suspicion. The woman was Su Huan, wife of Wen Min. The man, Chen Guang, an 18-year-old apprentice at the factory. The coroner's report was clear. Both had died 2 days earlier. The cause, asphyxiation, but one detail lingered like an unanswered question. Su Huan's head had been shaved, and the hair unearthed earlier. It had been hers. Why would Wen Min do that? Police prepared for his arrest. But that's when they realized their mistake. From the very start, they had doubted the story told by Jingyon, the man who had come forward. That doubt had led to procedural failure. They hadn't secured the suspect. And now, when Min was gone, whispers soon swept through the district. People claimed he'd been there all along, hidden in the crowd, watching quietly as officers unearthed the truth from beneath his factory floor. No one had recognized him. The revelation shattered public trust. The department's credibility was shaken. A warrant for Wen Min's arrest went out immediately to understand why these murders happened. Investigators turned to the lives behind the names. When Min was 31, he'd never had formal education, but his hands held a rare talent. He'd become a well-known mannequin craftsman, respected for his artistry. His wife, Su Huan, was a year younger. They'd met in a billiard hall and raised 3 children together. But their marriage had been fragile. Arguments, distance, accusations that never truly faded. The male victim, Chen Guang, was just a boy 18 and on the cusp of completing his apprenticeship. 3 other apprentices had recently gone on leave. Police interviewed them first. They couldn't explain the violence, but one clue stood out. Not long before the murders, when Min accused someone of stealing 2,000 NT DOR, $65, he argued violently with his wife. Then he shaved her head. That was 3 days before the bodies were found, on the night of August 3rd, when Min told everyone he knew who had taken the money. Then he gave all his employees a week off. By the time police came knocking, the apprentices were already gone, so investigators visited the families of the victims. Guang's parents shared something crucial before his death. Their son had confided in them. When Min had accused him of having an affair with Su Huan and beaten him, but Guang insisted he was innocent. He didn't quit his job, fearing that walking away would only confirm his boss's suspicions. Next, police met when Min's sister, Wang Shenya, and her words peeled back a painful history. Years earlier, when Wen Min was away for military training, Su Wan had begun an affair with a neighborhood pharmacist. That man, known for his bad reputation, had manipulated Su Wan, convinced her to drug her husband with something that wouldn't kill him, but would leave him broken, impotent. When Min noticed the symptoms, he visited doctors, searched for answers. None came. The betrayal unraveled him slowly, and it didn't stop there. The pharmacist tried again, this time convincing Su Wan to work as a hostess in a bar. She refused. She ended the relationship. Eventually, she confessed everything to her husband. When Min reported the pharmacist, who was punished by law, but justice sometimes isn't enough to quiet what lingers inside a wounded man. Shenya also shared one last memory. Before disappearing, her brother had borrowed 5,000 NTD from her, around $165. She gave it without question. Now, pieces were falling into place. Perhaps when Min, haunted by betrayal, imagined a relationship between Su Huan and Guang, maybe that paranoia, born from a scar that never healed, had driven him to kill them both. It was a theory, but only when Min could confirm it. Police believed capturing him would be quick. Why? Because he had no ties to organized crime, fled with only a small amount of cash, and Taiwan's geography made it hard to run far. But one more thread needed tugging. Jing and the man who had led them here. Was he truly just a coerced bystander, or something more? 2 teams formed, one to search for Wen Min. The other 2 questioned Jingen again, and this time his story unraveled. He said that on the night of August 4th, when Min came to his door, He looked frantic. He said his wife had vanished 2 days earlier, he told Jingen. The police weren't helping. He asked him to accompany him to Tikong. Jingen agreed, but before they left, when Min claimed he had forgotten something at the factory, they returned to Chikai Art Garden. Once inside, when Min locked the iron gate, and he confessed, he told Jingen he had killed his wife and the apprentice. He begged for help disposing of the bodies. Jingen tried to run, but when Min threatened him, said the bodies were under the bed and he'd soon be joining them if he didn't help. Terrified, Jingen complied. They dragged the bodies to the basement. They filled the pit with soil. The task took until dawn. Then when Min made him buy cement, chemicals, anything to erase what they'd done. When Min began mixing the cement, Jingen saw his chance. He ran home. He hid inside a wardrobe. Silent dot when Min came looking for him. He didn't find him by afternoon. Jingen fled again, this time to his brother's house. There, too scared to speak clearly, he begged his brother to call the police. Just then, when Min showed up at the door, Jingen escaped out the back and ran straight to the station. His story matched the crime scene, but doubts lingered. Jingen was a strong manner blacksmith with a thick frame and powerful arms. When Min was small, barely 5'3", would such a man really fear Min? And why would Min dig the pit alone, only to ask for help with easier tasks? Police confronted Jing and An. Finally, he told the truth. He hadn't been forced. Min had offered him money. In a moment of greed, Jingen helped bury the bodies, but guilt soon overtook him, so he confessed. Further investigation revealed Jingen had suffered a head injury years ago. Though functional, his mind processed things differently. His speech was unusual. There was more when Min and Jingen were practically family. Jingen's brother was Min's brother was Min's brother in dash law. When Min had even introduced Jingen to his wife, it made sense why he'd turn to someone like Jingen for help. But it also made everything murkier. Could Jingen's words be trusted? That was why they had to find Min. The case couldn't end without him. Police were so confident, they didn't even issue a reward. But as days passed, that confidence began to wane. They searched across Taipei, then expanded to Taichung. Still, no trace. Then, a man named Yang Gangquan rushed into the station. His wife, Lu Wang, was missing. He believed she was with Min. Lu Wang, a 30-year-old mother of 5, had once done business with Min's factory. Neighbors had seen her climb onto Wen's motorcycle. She never came back. Police feared another tragedy. They searched the factory again this time, found photographs, intimate, close pictures of Lu Wang, clearly taken with her consent. She had taken her ID, some money, and left. Police concluded she had run away with Min by choice. The case had changed. Now, Min wasn't just a fugitive, he had company. By August's end, they had become Taiwan's most talked about fugitives. Everyone had a theory, everyone had a sighting, but no one knew where they were. The police froze bank accounts, warned the public that helping the couple would bring criminal charges. Still, the shadows swallowed them whole, and Taiwan waited. August 16th. 10 days had passed since the bodies were found, and then a letter appeared. It had been intercepted, sent by Min to his father. On the front, written in Chinese, he begged for understanding, not for himself, but for his 5 children. He asked his father to send 2,000 NTD to a man named Gan Quan, supposedly to help them survive. But the back of the letter told another story. Written in Japanese language, Lu Wang couldn't read when Min gave a secret order. Don't send the money. It was a lie, a manipulation, a cruel tactic to test his control over both his father and his lover. When the police saw the letter, they didn't keep it quiet. They gave it to the press, hoping to create a wedge between the two fugitives. They also revealed that Lu Wang had been home with her children when the murders occurred. She hadn't played any role in the killings. Maybe, just maybe, exposing when Min's deception would make her see the truth and come home to push that hope further. Police allowed Lu Wang's husband, Gan Kwon, to publish an open letter in the newspaper. In it, he said he would forgive everything if she just returned. Her eldest daughter added her own words. "Mum," she wrote, "my brother and sister are crying. I miss you so much." But none of it moved her when Min and Lu Wang remained in the wind. The trail was growing cold. Public confidence was wearing thin dots. So, on August 24th, without any better options, the police put up a reward, 30,000 NTD, about $750, a sum offered to anyone who could help them find Wen Min. But Lu Wang's neighbors noticed something strange. The photo released to the public, it was outdated, taken after her 5th pregnancy, when she still carried the weight of motherhood on her frame. She looked nothing like that. Now she had lost weight, changed. The picture was useless. The police tried a new angle. They revealed a peculiar detail about when Min-hee had a strange medical condition. In the summer, he needed to drink herbal tea regularly to manage it. That tiny fact spread like wildfire. Suddenly, herbal tea stalls across Taiwan were flooded with people, each one scanning the crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of the fugitive and claim the reward. More than 160 tips poured in, all of them worthless. Then came August 30th, and everything changed. A letter appeared at the United Daily News office sent by Wen Min himself. Inside, he described the quiet agony of life on the run. He said he longed to return to his family, that he had not meant to kill Su Won or Chen Guang. He admitted to beating his wife, but insisted he didn't know her injuries were fatal. He said her death was an accident. He pleaded that if the paper published his letter, he and Lu Wang would surrender the next day. The paper published the letter, and at 11 p.m. on August 31st, they kept their word. The fugitives arrived by taxi at the police station, hand in hand. The photographs published the next day shocked the public. They didn't look like people who had been hiding. They were clean, calm, polished. And Lu Wang, she clung to Wen Min's side, as if the world could not pry her away. As the truth came out, it stunned everyone. The couple had been hiding in a small house just a short distance from the Nanmen police station in Xinyu City. Every day, Wen Min disguised himself with a conical hat, rode a bicycle, sold herbal tea at a roadside stall, while the public searched for him, camping out at tea stands, hoping for a glimpse of the killer he had been standing just a few feet away, right under their noses. Their surrender gave the police closure, but not answers. When questioned, when Min confirmed he had assaulted his wife, and that her death came because she didn't receive treatment in time. But he denied killing Chen Guang. He claimed the real killer was Zhang An. The very man who had turned him in. When Min said it began on July 24th, he discovered 2,000 NTD missing, suspected his wife. While searching, he found perfume in her drawer, scent he didn't recognize. He snapped. He tied her up, beat her, cut her hair so she wouldn't go outside, so she wouldn't tempt anyone else. By July 31st, Su Won was bedridden. That day, Guang brought food. When Min caught them whispering to him, it looked like confirmation of betrayal, of deceit. He lashed out again. He tied up Guang too, beat him, demanded the truth. But what were they actually whispering about? According to Guang's family, when they saw him injured, he explained what had happened. Su Won had begged him to help. She told him her husband was beating her every day and if it didn't stop, she'd die. She needed someone to get help. That was all. But when Min overheard and interpreted it as something else, a secret, an affair, a betrayal, Guang insisted he wasn't involved. In fact, he claimed that if anyone had been close to Su Won, it was Jingen's brother. Jingen was present at the time. He exploded. "You're the one sleeping with your boss's wife," he screamed. "And now you want to blame my brother," in a fit of rage. Jingen attacked Guang. He punched, kicked, covered his mouth to stop the screams. Su Won tried to intervene, tried to stop the violence. When Min turned on her again, in the chaos, Guang stopped breathing. Su Won died shortly after. The two men stared at what they'd done. They bought tools, cement, buried the truth beneath the floor. When Min admitted it had been both of them, not just him, and he had never expected Jingen to betray him. He said when he saw reporters flood the factory, he knew it was over. He ran to Lu Wang, told her everything, and she didn't hesitate. She took her ID, some cash, and followed him into the night. But there were still contradictions. The forensic report showed strangulation marks on Guang's neck, clear and undeniable. If, when Min claimed Guang had been beaten to death, how could that be explained? That question would define the trial. On October 18, 1967, the case was brought to the Taipei District Court when Min insisted Su Huan's death was accidental. But the court didn't believe him. His death sentence was nearly guaranteed. The bigger question was Jing'an. When Min claimed Jing'an had killed, Guang Jingen claimed he'd only helped bury the bodies. The court sided with Jingen. They believed both victims had died at the hands of Wen Min, driven by jealousy and rage. Jingen was deemed an unwilling participant, coerced into helping after the fact. He was found innocent, but the prosecutor disagreed. He appealed, and over the next 9 years, the courts bounced back and forth. Guilty, innocent, guilty again. It wasn't until March 16, 1976, that the Supreme Court delivered its final ruling. Jingen was guilty of murder. The decision was based on prison testimony. Jingen had told other inmates, "I wish murder were only a life sentence. And because Guang was nosy, I strangled him." The judge pointed to Jingen's choices. He'd had chances to escape but stayed. He only ran after the bodies were buried. If he was innocent, why wait? In the end, Jingen was sentenced to life in prison for intentional homicide. As for Wen Min, his sentence never changed. After 9 years of appeals, the court upheld his death sentence. He was executed by firing squad just 4 days later. But by then, the public had moved on. They no longer talked about Wen Min. Their attention had shifted to the woman beside him, Lu Wang, a mother of 5, who had left her children behind to follow a man who had murdered his wife. Why? Why would she make that choice? The answer came quietly, in fragments. She and Wen Min had known each other since they were children. They were childhood sweethearts. Both shared a love of painting. Their personalities harmonized. But she had married someone else, Gan Quan. And that marriage was far from happy. The investigation had been quiet but relentless, in a covert operation. Detectives zeroed in on a police vehicle spotted near the crime scene. What they found inside confirmed their worst suspicion: explosive residue. The very same compound used in the car bombing that killed Lu Haiping. Footprints, powder traces. The killer had been sloppy, and this sloppiness told a story. Only one police vehicle had been near the scene that day. It belonged to Deputy Team Leader Chen Ji. All the evidence was pointing directly at him. But that wasn't all. A second team of investigators searched Lu Haiping's apartment. Inside, they found the usual: family photos, framed memories, a picture of her young son. But tucked in between them something far less ordinary: intimate photos of Haiping with another man, a powerful one, Duan Ether, director of the Standing Committee of the Jinan Municipal People's Congress. Their closeness in the photos left nothing to interpretation. It was clear they weren't just acquaintances, they were lovers. But love doesn't always equal murder. So detectives focused on motive, and they saw three possibilities: Haiping's ex-husband, still resentful; Deputy Chen Ji, the suspicious police officer; or Duan Eti, the powerful secret lover. All three had reason. All three had means. But as the investigation tightened, one name dropped away. The ex-husband was ruled out. Then came a discovery that rewrote everything: a hidden relationship between Chen Ji and Duan Ehi. Chen Ji wasn't just a colleague or subordinate. He was Duan Ehi's nephew in law. Suddenly, the explosion wasn't just a killing, it was a conspiracy. On July 11th, just 3 days after the blast, police moved in on Chen Ji. They invited him for tea. But it wasn't tea, 'twas an interrogation. As an officer himself. Chen Ji knew the moment he sat down. They had evidence, and it was airtight. He broke quickly and confessed everything: the plan, the explosives, the trigger. But most of all, he gave them a name. He said he had acted on orders from Duan Ehi within 4 days of the bombing. A second arrest sent shockwaves through political circles. Duan Itia, senior provincial official, was taken into custody by a joint task force of the Discipline Commission, Public Security, and prosecutors. He didn't last long under questioning. 1 hour in, his mask fell. He admitted it all. Yes, he ordered the killing of Lu Haiping. Yes, he used his nephew-in-law to do it. And no, he didn't regret it. Only the method. "If I could do it again," he said coldly, "I'd still kill her. I'd just choose another way." No remorse, only contempt for the woman he once loved. So what happened? What turned love into murder? That answer began with Duan Yi's own words. He told them everything. Born in 1946 in a poor farming village, Duan Eti had grown up with little. He spent his childhood cutting grass, herding buffalo, feeding pigs. A scar on his hand from a wood-cutting accident never faded, but neither did his ambition. In 1965, he became the first person in his village to enter university. To the people back home, he was a phoenix rising from the mud. He didn't let them down. He rose through the ranks of government with cunning, charisma, and quiet determination. Even at the height of his power, he played the part of a humble official. When he returned to his village, he'd walk barefoot on the dirt roads. He'd stop to talk to old neighbors. He made people believe he was clean. Incorruptible. But then, Lu Haiping appeared. The year was 1996. Duan Eti had just been transferred to a new post in Liuchang, Shandong. His wife, still working at a provincial hospital, couldn't join him. He was alone, and into that loneliness stepped an 18-year-old assistant, Lou. She brought him tea, washed his shirts, cooked for him. He was 48. She was 18. She made him feel powerful, young again. Their bond grew. What started as care became seduction, and Duan, a supposed man of principle, fell hard. When he was transferred back to Jinan, he couldn't let her go, so he abused his power for the first time. He pulled strings, got her transferred to a company under the Provincial Electronics Bureau, bought her a private apartment, and so it began a second life, a hidden life, a mistress in the shadows. Every step of his political rise, he took her with him. He got her a job in the Civil Affairs Bureau, bought her another apartment, a car, and in Jinan she began to live like royalty. Her name carried weight. Doors opened. She even brought her family from her hometown, and through whispered pillow talks, she persuaded Duen to help them to dot jobs, registrations, influenced the woman he once cared for, was now feeding on his power. His wife eventually heard the rumors, but instead of leaving, she begged him to stop. He pretended he had, but the affair continued now, more secretive than ever, to fool the public. Lou, even married a doctor, but the truth came out. Her husband found out, filed for divorce, and now 2 families had been wrecked. The fallout changed her. Where once there had been affection, now there was only calculation. If she couldn't have Duan his heart, she would drain him for all he was worth. By 2006, she demanded even more: a job transfer, a luxury apartment, a new car. Duan, addicted to his secret life, gave in. But she wanted more than comfort. She wanted legitimacy. She wanted legitimacy. She wanted to be his wife, to stand beside him openly. But he had never intended that to him. She was a beautiful chapter, a moment, never a future. Their arguments turned ugly, and when she began threatening to expose their affair, it enraged him. He believed he had given her everything, and now she was trying to destroy him. She became a liability, a threat. The idea of ending it for good began to take shape. But how? He needed someone who could kill and stay silent, someone who owed him. That someone was Chen Ji, his nephew-in-law, a man whose entire career had been built on Duan's favor. When they spoke, during the Lunar New Year of 2007, the topic came up. Chen Ji understood what he was being asked, and he agreed. Their first idea was a staged car accident, but it was too risky. The city streets were crowded, no chance to gain speed. So Chen Ji came up with another plan, one drawn from his past. He had once been a military engineer. He knew how to build bombs. He shared the idea with Duan, and Duan approved. Chen Ji would handle the execution. Duan would provide the victim's address, keys, routines, to gather materials. Chen Ji reached out to an old contact in Chongbing 40, a garage owner who specialized in remote control devices. Together, they began testing. 2 trials were run with smaller explosives. Then came the final build: 2 kilograms of TNT and a remote trigger, enough to shred steel and flesh. But just as everything was in place, Chen Ji began to waver. The weight of what he was about to do, murder a woman with a single button, began to haunt him. Even as Duan pushed for urgency, Chen Ji stalled, delayed, hoping, perhaps, that something would stop him, that someone would. By July 2007, Chen Ji could delay no longer. On the sweltering afternoon of July 9th, he and Qin Chongbing quietly drove a marked police car to the district where Lu Haiping worked. In the back seat lay the weapon, a homemade bomb, ready to kill. They found her car is a pale blue Honda, parked like it always was. Hands trembling, Chen Ji used the remote key Duan Yihe had given him. The doors clicked open in under a minute. They slid the explosive device under the driver's seat. It was clumsy, rushed, but it was done. They drove off quickly, disappearing into traffic, hoping to catch sight of her car later on the road she usually took home. But fate did not cooperate. 5 minutes into surveillance, they lost her. Panic set in, so Chen Ji took one last gamble. He sped toward Jingo Road, familiar stretch where Haiping always passed through. There in the still heat of the late afternoon, they waited. In the police car, Chen Ji sat frozen, hand hovering over the remote detonator. Outside, Qin Chongbing casually mingled with vendors and passers-by, pretending to be just another pedestrian. At one point, he approached an elderly woman resting in the shade. "Is this the residential community up ahead?" he asked, his voice strained, his accent strange. The old woman nodded, but something about him stuck with her. The tightness in his jaw, the sweat beading on his brow. Something was off. Minutes later, Lu Haiping's Honda appeared at the end of the road. She had no idea death was seconds away. Qin Chongbing stepped back and gave the call in a blink. A thunderous explosion shattered the street. Metal tore like paper. Glass rained down like daggers. Haiping was gone instantly. The force of the blast also injured a street vendor nearby, spreading panic through the crowd. But amid the chaos, one pair of eyes saw what others missed. That same elderly woman, the one Qin had spoken to. She saw him sprint toward a police car, not away from danger but into it. He disappeared into traffic before anyone could react. But she didn't forget. She wrote down the license plate number, single details, seemingly small, that would soon unravel the entire case. On July 13th, Duan Yihe was removed from his office. Within an hour, he confessed. He gave investigators a full list of his connections, opening the floodgates on something far bigger than a murder. The court's findings were damning. Duan had abused his power for years, accepting over 1.69 million yuan in bribes and possessing another 1.33 million yuan in unexplained assets. What began as a murder case became a mirror reflecting deep rot in the political system, and Lu Haiping, far from being a nameless mistress, had seen her end coming in her final weeks. She'd told her family, "If anything happens to me, it's Duan Yihe. He'll be the one who kills me." She knew she had become too dangerous to the man who once loved her. Yihe believed he could bury the crime beneath the fuel tank. Explosion in hot weather would pass as an accident. He was wrong. He had just 59 days left before the law closed in. Despite his arrest, Yihe didn't think he'd be executed. He believed his age and former rank would grant leniency, a retirement in disgrace, but not death. So, in interrogation, he remained oddly composed, cooperative, even reflective. He told the story of his entire life, 61 years, from poverty to power to disgrace. Each of the three men wore a different face before justice. Qin Chongbing cried and begged, pointing to the hesitation he'd shown before the final act, hoping the court would view him as unwilling. Chen Ji tried to shift blame, painting himself as a pawn coerced, trapped in a powerful man's web. And Duan Yihe, he admitted his crimes, but not his guilt. When the prosecutor asked if he felt remorse if He could do it all again. What would he change? His answer stunned even veteran officers. I regret only the method. I shouldn't have used explosives, but I'd still kill her, he said flatly. And this wasn't his first plan. He confessed he had thought of poisoning her gas line, sabotaging her car tires. Every time he'd failed, it only deepened his resolve. He told investigators about one failed attempt where her tire went flat before reaching the highway. Instead of ending her life, he ended up fixing her car. It was a moment drenched in irony. A man who wanted her dead forced to help her live. Ultimately, the court delivered its verdict. Duan Eti and Chen Giboth sentenced to death. Chin Chongbing life imprisonment. This story was never just about a love affair gone wrong. It was about a 30-year age gap that turned from affection to control, from protection to manipulation. It was about a man in power, and the woman who dared to demand more than secrecy. When selfish love meets unchecked power, tragedy isn't just likely, it's inevitable. As Fan Hongwei struggled to hold his family together, a quiet storm was brewing behind his back. By October 2021, he discovered the truth. Jia had been secretly sending massive virtual gifts worth hundreds of thousands of yuan to male streamers online. During a trip back to their hometown, Fan confided in his brother. He shared the disturbing reality. Jia claimed these extravagant donations weren't typical in-app purchases. If she became a top contributor, she'd earn a VIP account that allowed her to rate and review restaurants and venues. But it was a lie. There were no rewards, no refunds, just empty promises. She had been scammed on, the money was gone. Worse still, she had borrowed heavily and maxed out credit cards to fund her obsession. The debt crushed them. Fan, with no other choice, sold the home they had bought together before marriage to cover the losses. His family couldn't understand it, why he would give up so much, but over time, they began to piece things together. On November 24, 2021, Fan returned to his hometown in Henan to pay respects to his ancestors. No one knew it would be the last time they'd see him alive by mid-December. About 20 days later, Fan's family began to worry. He no longer answered phone or video calls, just short text messages. When his mother asked where he was, Jia answered on his behalf. She claimed he'd fled Suzhou to escape creditors, that he was hiding and too ashamed to talk. Given their recent financial struggles, the story seemed believable. Fan's WeChat was still occasionally updated, and location shares were sent to his family. Jia continued to reassure them. She was in contact with him, and he would return once their troubles were over. But slowly, the requests began. In the weeks that followed, Fan's family received messages asking for money, urgent pleas for help. First, 30,000 yuan to pay overdue rent, then 43,000 more to repay a loan supposedly taken from Jia's mother. Each request sounded desperate, and Fan's mother, though not wealthier, sent what she could. A few thousand here, tens of thousands there. She believed she was helping her son survive, buying him time to return home. But the truth? Fan had already been dead for weeks. He was curled up in the family refrigerator. And it wasn't him sending those messages. It was Jia, the same woman they'd known as reserved and quiet, now impersonating her dead husband to drain his grieving family of every last yuan. Months passed. As the Lunar New Year of 2022 approached, Fan's parents visited his home in Seoul, hoping to see their son. He wasn't there, but his daughter, barely old enough to understand, spoke of how much she missed her father. Her innocent words shattered their hearts. They sat for a while, shared a meal, and left. Soon after, another request came for money to pay home loan installments. 3 months had passed with no contact. Now, suspicion began to take hold. Fan's family considered the possibility he had joined a pyramid scheme. Still, they never suspected Jia. On February 24, 2022, Fan's family, accompanied by Jia, filed a missing persons report at the local station, but Jia blocked the investigation at every turn. She proactively told police that Fan had left due to debt, that he was far away working, but still in touch with her. She claimed he was messaging friends and colleagues regularly. To Fan's family, she played a different role, sympathetic, struggling, left to raise a child alone. The police found no red flags. Fan's messages, though limited to text, kept trickling in, and Jia, always calm, always careful, never faltered. Fan's older brother finally broke. He sent an angry message to his missing brother, demanding a call, questioning if the person on the other end was even Fan at all. He never got a reply. Just more texts. Time marched forward. Mid-Autumn Festival 2022. Fan's parents prepared to visit Yanjian again, but they were stopped. Jia's mother informed them that 2 months earlier, Jia had suddenly packed up and left with her daughter, the television, and the refrigerator. She didn't even tell her own mother where she was going. Alarmed, Jia's mother reported her disappearance to the police. They quickly tracked Jia to a rental in Suzhou's Shangchang district. When her mother visited, Jia was cold, distant. She offered no explanation for the move. Eventually, her mother left confused, defeated. Fan's parents weren't done. On the morning of the festival, they visited the new apartment. Inside, Fan's older brother noticed something strange. The refrigerator they had once owned, now plugged in, sealed tightly with tape. It unnerved him, but out of politeness, he said nothing. Then, in October 2022, Jia returned to the former apartment. By Lunar New Year 2023, she took her daughter to visit Fan's hometown. She smiled, said their debts were nearly gone, that Fan would be back soon. And they believed her. On March 8, 2023, 15 months after Fan vanished, the family received a text, "I'll be home next month." Their hearts lifted just for a moment, because the very next day, everything unraveled. March 9th, Jia's mother visited the apartment to clean. She noticed the cluttered refrigerator in the corner, the one sealed with tape. She peeled it open. At the bottom, beneath the frozen meats, she found Fan's lifeless body, cold, and preserved like a secret. Screaming in horror, she fled the apartment. Later that day, under her mother's insistence, Jia confessed. She was arrested immediately. An autopsy revealed Fan had died from a mix of drug and carbon monoxide poisoning. Jia had poisoned him, then placed his body in the refrigerator. How long she kept him there, no one can say for sure. She claimed the murder stemmed from family disputes, but the layers ran deeper. The money Fan's family had sent to save him, nearly 200,000 yuan, was funneled into Jia's bank account. She also borrowed 50,000 from his brother and 120,000 from her own parents under false pretenses. In total, she swindled over 370,000 yuan, around $50,000. Where did it go? Into virtual gifts, streamer platforms, a fantasy world where she reigned as queen. Even after killing her husband, Jia continued spending lavishly on a male music streamer. She rose to the top of his leaderboard. He thanked her publicly in posts, even naming her among his top supporters. She wasn't just a donor, she was a presence. Her account achieved the title of Duke, a rank requiring at least 30 million experience points, which meant she had spent nearly 300,000 yuan. Reports suggest the streamer also lived in Suzhou. By late 2021, just months after Fan's death, Jia's interactions with him intensified. She was no longer the quiet woman others thought she was. Online. She was bold, flirtatious. Her Weibo posts hinted at love. But it wasn't for Fan. Some speculated she and the streamer had an inappropriate relationship, that her obsession had crossed into real life. In response to the growing outcry, the streamer's management released a statement denying any connection. They claimed Jia met him after Fan's death hand denied she'd spent 300,000 yuan. Pressed by reporters, the streamer simply said, "I didn't know she was married, but Fan had discovered her obsession before his murder. It's likely she was supporting multiple streamers at once." Even as her husband's corpse sat frozen just feet away, she posted selfies, soul-healing captions, reflections on life. Her videos showed gourmet meals, gaming, shopping while living with a corpse. There was no remorse, no grief. The police believed the crime was calculated. Jia had crossed a line most people never approach. The motive, not passion, not fear, it was money, shame, exposure. Fan had sacrificed everything, sold their home, covered her debts. He was a devoted father, a responsible son, a man trying to save a drowning marriage. There's no evidence he was abusive, no signs he lived a reckless life, so why hide his body? Why impersonate him? Why steal? Because the truth would have destroyed the image Jia had created. She was not the woman she portrayed, and Fan may have seen through her. That investigators believe is what sealed his fate. On December 21st, 2023, Jia stood trial in the Suzhou Intermediate People's Court for intentional homicide and fraud. No verdict was announced that day. Fan's family demanded the harshest sentence and full compensation. Whether Jia will face the death penalty is now in the court's hands. Turning herself in may not save her. In cases like this, remorse is not enough. Some compare the case to the infamous 2016 Shanghai freezer murder, where Su Chaidong killed his wife and hid her body for 105 days. Su turned himself in and still received a death sentence. In Jia's case, only one potential mitigating factor exists: forgiveness. But Fan's family refuses to give it. They want justice. The question now is whether the court can prove premeditation. If Jia used pre-prepared poison, then her actions qualify. Her efforts to cover up the murder, impersonate the victim, and continue the fraud reveal a chilling, deliberate pattern. The court hasn't delivered its ruling yet, but given the magnitude of the crime, the societal impact, and the precedent, Jia Dongul is likely to face the ultimate punishment. Still, the possibility of appeal lingers like the last whisper of a man frozen in silence.